Welcome to KLM, the Kavanah Mitzvahs Foundation, and we're zocha to be in the Yibnei Beis Midrash to discuss Tu BShvat, how to maximize Tu BShvat. Tu BShvat with Kavanah mitzvahs will be a game changer. So let me just open with a question that's really important. Eating fruits on Tu BShvat, is it a mitzvah? Or is it a minhag, a tradition, a nice tradition? Or did I present you with a false dichotomy? The answer is I presented you with a false dichotomy. It is a minhag, a tradition, but we have to understand minhagim, Jewish traditions, are mitzvahs. And what's beautiful is this tradition of eating fruits on Tu BShvat, it's an easy mitzvah. And you're supposed to run to an easy mitzvah. So it's easy because it's easy to do and pleasurable. But we have to beware of the Yetzer Hara, because his job is to undermine our mitzvahs. And when something's easy, he gets us not to think about what we're doing. And when it's pleasurable, he gets us lost in the pleasure. So tonight, we're going to learn how to actually take these easy mitzvahs and make them deep and beautiful, connecting experiences. How to maximize Tu BShvat. As we said in the beginning, that yes, Tu BShvat is a practice. The Mogen Avram brings this in the Shulchan Aruch, that there is a custom to eat fruits on the new year for the fruits of the tree. So it is a custom, it is a minhag. But we said that that's much more than we think. And that's what we're going to see. But first let's focus on two types of minhagim that we do on Tu BShvat. First of all, there is a practice to search for a new fruit that would get a blessing of a shehechianu, right? A new fruit that you haven't tasted this year. There's a lot of halachas. Speak to your local rabbi on that. But it's a tradition to find some new fruits that you can make a bracha of a shehechianu. That's number one. And another common practice on Tu BShvat is eating fruits from the Shivas Minim, right? The 7 minim, the species that are mentioned, the fruits that are mentioned connected to Eretz Yisrael. We're going to discuss the beauty of both in 1 minute. But first of all, let's just understand, how can we eternalize this event? So the first thing we mentioned is it's a minhag. And we said a minhag is not just a tradition, not just a sweet tradition. A minhag, as Tosfos says in Kesubah, Torahi, a minhag, an accepted practice, right? When the rabbinic authorities validate a practice, a minhag, it becomes Torah. That's very, very significant. It becomes halacha. A lot of what we practice, a lot of what's mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch are actually minhagim. In our siddur, the siddur is filled with minhagim. Adon Olam, Aleinu, those are not rabbinic commandments, those are minhagim. But they have become halacha. But now we have to understand what level of halacha, what level of Torah is a minhag. So, listen to this. Let's bring a famous, the source for it, okay? It says in Mishlei, Shma b'ni musar avicha, al titosh Torah semecha. In other words, and that's in the first parak, pasuk ches. So it says there, do not abandon the Torah of your mother. So Hazal explaining, Mar Psachim, etc., the Torah of your mother, the mother is Knesset Yisrael. Don't abandon her Torah traditions, her practices. So we learn from this, when you do a minhag, you're fulfilling this injunction. Don't forget the Torah of your mother, don't abandon it. So from this we learn that minhagim are mitzvahs midivrei Kabbalah. Now the Rambam actually says, when you do a minhag, you have a mitzvah aseh to listen to the rabbis and a mitzvah lo aseh to not rebel against them. So he holds there's two commandments. The others say that it's what we call mitzvah midivrei Kabbalah. Now, let me explain. A famous mitzvah midivrei Kabbalah is the mitzvahs of Purim. And it says in the Shulchan Aruch the following situation. If there was a person who was a mourner in the day, and a mourner is prohibited from drinking wine, but what if it's Purim? Can he drink wine on Purim? Says the Shulchan Aruch. Well, the prohibition to have wine when a person's a mourner, that's a rabbinic commandment, right? And it's saying a rabbinic prohibition does not push off an aseh, a positive commandment, because simcha on Purim is, it says, is deraisa. It says it's ke'ein deraisa. So we see that something that makes the status of a Torah commandment alluded to in the Tanakh is a very significant mitzvah, right? Minhagei Yisrael are mitzvahs. And the Mogen Avram says eating fruits on Tu BShvat is a mitzvah. So here's what I want to stress to you. For a few seconds thought, the Ran says as follows. You know, a lot of people will be eating fruits on Tu BShvat. Now, wouldn't it be a shame not to stop 1 second saying, wait a minute, this whole act of eating fruits on Tu BShvat, it's a minhag, and therefore it's a commandment of Hashem. And so, therefore, mitzvahs require kavanah. And when you just stop for a few seconds and think, I have intention to fill the mitzvah of observing minhagei Yisrael, the customs of Klal Yisrael, you just, according to the Ran, one who observes a custom or does a mitzvah without kavanah, versus one who just takes that moment and says, Tu BShvat, I'm going to do this minhag as a mitzvah. He says you cannot calculate the reward. So that's number one, game-changing point number one, okay? So that's before you do the mitzvah, you want to have in mind the minhag, that you're observing the minhag of eating fruits on Tu BShvat. Now, the second mitzvah has to do with during the eating, okay? So if you just positioned your eating incredibly when you just had that in mind. But what about while you're eating? Remember, we said mitzvahs that are easy, that are pleasurable, you can get lost in the pleasure and forget the deeper connections available. And I just want to say, for all of you Yibbenei people, you have a tremendous schus, because Rabbi next week is going to be conducting a Tu BShvat Seder, and for sure the eating experience will be very spiritual. I want to also discuss a mitzvah. This is another mitzvah to have in mind, game changer, if you do it while you're eating, while you're saying a shechianu and eating a new fruit, while you're eating the Shevet Minim. And what's that? We've learned this, we've discussed this several times in KLM. Thanking Hashem is a Torah commandment. According to Rabbeinu Yonah, we have a mitzvah to remember all the kindnesses that Hashem's done, all the way from the beginning of us becoming a people, but all the more so for us personally. If Hashem wants to remember what He did for them, of course what He does for us. So, that's another mitzvah I want you to have in mind while you're making a shechianu and doing the Shivas Minim. But in addition to having that mitzvah in mind, remember minhag and thanking Hashem, remembering the kindness. In addition to that though, let's think about what we should reflect on while we're making a shechianu and eating a new fruit, and while we're eating the Shevet Minim. Let's understand that more deeply, and then this mitzvah of remembering the kindness will be much more profound. Okay, so let's look more deeply into the second major mitzvah of eating fruits on Tu BShvat. And we said it's the mitzvah, it's in Devarim, Perek Ches, Pasuk Ches, to remember Hashem's kindnesses, okay? But now, there's two things we do here. The part of the minhag is to search out, find a fruit that you haven't eaten this year, a new fruit, and make a shechianu. So, listen to how important this is. There's a Gemara Yerushalmi that says something, and those of you who've studied maybe Messias Yesharim might be familiar with this. It's a shocker. It says in the Gemara Yerushalmi, the Talmud Yerushalmi, that when a person goes on to the next world, they're going to have to give a din and cheshbon. They're going to have to do an accounting or reckoning of their behavior. And then you know what they're going to be asked? Was there a fruit that you could have tasted and you didn't taste it? You're going to be judged for whether or not you had these fruits. Now that's a little surprising. I understand I'll be judged on how I treated my neighbor, whether I learned Torah, but whether I tasted a fruit, that's a little surprising. So I'm going to focus on one that'll help us, an understanding that'll help us for Tu BShvat. So the Korban Ada, famous commentator on the Yerushalmi, he says that behind the requirement to taste a fruit that you haven't tasted, or certainly this year, is saying that you're going to be held accountable for not making a shehechianu on a fruit when you could have. In other words, it's really a remarkable thing. So in other words, a shehechianu, for those of you who are not familiar, is basically a blessing where we thank Hashem for having the privilege to be alive and to merit the experience we're about to have. It's usually a special blessing for new experiences, and here for fruits. So you hear this, according to the Korban, we are expected to make a shehechianu. So now, why would it be that making this blessing of a shehechianu on new fruits is so important that we're going to be asked about it later? You hear the question. So let's go to another Gemara that's actually maybe a little surprising to you. It's Gemara in Shabbos. And it says, anyone who says Vayachulu on Shabbos, on the night of Shabbos, is considered a partner in the Maisa of Bereishis. In other words, the passage in the Torah that describes Hashem finishing off the creation of the world, when you recite that, it says you're partnering with Hashem in the creation of the world. So let us ask a simple question. I don't know anybody that was around in the creation of the world, even Adam Arishon. when he was created, okay, he was created before, he wasn't involved at all. He came in after all that. So how could it be that by declaring this, the fact that Hashem created the world and finished the world, how do we become partners from that? How did we get promoted to such a position? So my Rebbe, Rabbi Green, he explained like this. Hashem made the world for a purpose. And it's true, he made it. It's his Maisa, it's his creation. However, the purpose of the creation is that people will recognize what a beautiful, kind, wise, tremendous world Hashem made for us to connect to him through the beauty of the world. So recognition that Hashem created these wonderful things we find here, that makes us partners. Why are we partners? Because we're helping him achieve the purpose of the creation. So with that in mind, we can understand. Hashem says, search out, find new fruits, find new experiences, and tag them. Tag them as coming from me. Teach the world to experience joy and appreciation for what I've made, and realize that I made it for you so you'll connect to me. So according to that, a shehechianu is a very deep thing. When you're tagging this fruit and saying, thank God I arrived here to have this new and beautiful experience, and your world is beautiful. So that's number one. Remember, the mitzvah you do while you're eating is to remember Hashem's kindnesses. And here's how to do it behiddur, in a beautiful way. Think about that. I'm making this minhag of shehechianu and new fruits is to partner with Hashem and help him achieve his purpose by recognizing his beauty. Okay? That's the shehechianu. Now, let's talk about some fruits. Some very special fruits that we also have a practice and a minhag in Tu BShvat to make blessings on. And these, if you'll take a look, these are at least six, six of the 7 species that Eretz Yisrael is praised by. Okay, so here, it says in the Pasuk, all right, I'm going to bring this back in 1 second. It says in the Torah, in Devarim, I think this one is Perek Ches, Pasuk Ches, and the other was Bet. So it says there, Moshe is bringing the Jews are about to enter Eretz Yisrael, and Moshe, it wants to do, he's promoting how great Eretz Yisrael is. And he says, I'm bringing you to a good land. And then he mentions that there are springs and fountains, and that's a beautiful, the reason that that's part of the goodness of the land is beautiful, but we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on the next pasuk, Eretz Chita, So'ora. It mentions these fruits, these species of fruits, and that is meant to show us how good Eretz Yisrael is. So what are the fruits? Let's take a look. There's 7. So we have wheat here, and then there's barley. We couldn't find barley for this. Okay, I'm not necessarily going in the order of the Torah verse, but you also have, look at this. This is a leftover from the era of the spies. This is a giant pomegranate. So you have wheat, barley, pomegranate, geffen. You have grapes, right, and grape products. And you have shemen zayit, olive oil, and figs. Be careful about eating figs. Figs often have bugs, so you have to just make sure that you can. But then the other is what's called davash, which they understand means that the kind of liquid that flows out of a delicious date. So here's the question. Look at these fruits. There's 7 of them. The question we have to ask is, why these 7? Why are these a tremendous advertisement for the goodness of the land of Israel? That's the question, and I'll bring you 2 responses to that. The Abarbanel says that, maybe I'll keep this going, within this package of the 7 species, remember there's wheat and barley and the others, he says it has all the nutrients and nourishment that a person, it's like a tremendous collection of perfect nourishment. In fact, I spoke to a doctor and he told me that, he says, a person could live very well just having these 7 healthy, wonderful experience of living. Okay, that's from these 7 men. That's one. But that's from the Abarbanel. Here's another reason that's amazing that the Tshuvas Leket brings. It might be the Shibbolei Leket. He says, and I also spoke to some scientists about this. He says, you won't find a land that has all of these fruits in such close proximity, because we have an incredible terrain here with mountains and valleys and all the different climates. And this one expert I say, he says you can go to the most amazing places. You could go to South Africa and they have these incredible fruits in one region, but you'd have to travel. You'd have to take a plane to get to the other fruits. And all in this little land of Eretz Yisrael are all these incredibly nourishing fruits. So that's why the Sheva Minim is, it's a big deal. We make a special blessing after we eat enough of it, etc. So this is another mitzvah where we're remembering. Let's understand that Moshe wanted to educate us. He says, I want you to fall in love with the land of Israel. And here's how you do it. Look at these beautiful fruits that are all available in near proximity. Look at these. And then what's the purpose of falling in love with the land of Israel? To fall in love with and have gratitude to Hashem. So there we are. This is what you can do. Game changer, I hope life changer on Tu BShvat. You're going to eat fruits anyhow. How about making an eternal act? It's a mitzvah to observe a minhag. And finally, how about this? How about these practices of seeking out new fruits and making a shechianu and eating the Shivat Minim? Reflect as you eat. Enjoy, for sure, it's an easy mitzvah, enjoy, but let your mind delight in the kindnesses of Hashem and make sure you thank Him with a full heart and with Kavanah mitzvahs.